Welcome one and all to the second session of Day 5 of Faculty Development Program 2021, organized by KIIT School of Mass Communication. This is Souptik, Garai, your moderator for this session. Today, we begin with a session by Dr. Lalatendu Acharya, Assistant Professor of Health Sciences, School of Sciences, Indiana University, Kokomo, Indiana, USA. Dr. Acharya will be talking on the topic, Teaching Diversity and Social Justice in the Communication Culture, Journalism and Media Studies Classroom. So I'll invite Dr. Vidhubhushan Das, Course Coordinator at School of Mass Communication Journalism, to welcome Dr. Acharya. Over to you, sir.
Good evening, my dear participants of the Faculty Development Program 2021. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Organized by the School of Mass Communication, KIIT University, Bhubaneswar. And good morning, the resource person of 14th session of the Faculty Development Program of Day 5, Dr. Lalatendu Acharya. Dr. Acharya is an assistant professor at Indiana University, Kokomo, USA. Earlier, he has worked as an assistant professor in Polo University, US for more than 7 years. Before entering into academics, he has worked as communication officer for a couple of years with UNICEF. As educational qualifications are concerned, it's very much fascinating, especially for unidisciplinary people. He did Bachelor of Science in Physics from Utkal University, Bhubaneswar, management degree in marketing specialization from Javier University, now Javier Institute of Management, Bhubaneswar then, and PhD in health communication from Purdue University, US. Dr. Acharya is the youngest in the list of the resource person for the Faculty Development Program 2021, organized by the School of Mass Communication, KIIT University. But if you look at his contribution to academics, it's more than a few senior academicians to whom we have invited in past days. Dr. Acharya is having more than 30 publications in international reputed journals and books. His major research interest is health communication. When Dr. Acharya visits his home city, Bhubaneswar, we take the opportunity and invite him. Recently, Dr. Acharya visited and delivered a talk for students here. Now he is going to deliver a talk to us. So let me share the screen for a nostalgic moment. Ahmed, no, I'm not the co-host. Okay, I can't. In fact, Dr. Acharya visited our school. Okay. How to share? Just I will not take much time. No. Anyway, sir, unable to screen the share. I welcome you, sir, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Vidhu. Thank you very much, and thanks to all of you for coming to this session. I really appreciate it. I can share my screen, right?
Yeah, you are co-host.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. Well, first of all, I must thank you for inviting me to this session, and appreciate all to give the opportunity. And it's an interesting topic. It's a very interesting topic here in the US, also in our classrooms. So it will be good to talk about this and deliberate on it a bit with the time that we have. Second of all, thank you for calling me young. I'm not feeling so young anymore after just crossing 50. So, but it's nice. It feels nice, you know. And also thank you for bringing some points out of my resume. It's been an interesting journey to say after covering specialties from different fields. So either you can call me well educated or you can call me still confused, looking for more learning. So I guess it's good either way. With that, I'll start sharing my little presentation which I had made for you. That took me a bit of time, but it's a very interesting process. I have incorporated many principles of social justice and diversity in my classrooms and continue to do so. And you will find that you'll agree with me at the end of the presentation that it's an important topic. And I'm sure many of you are incorporating principles like this in your classrooms and doing fantastic. By sharing some theories and some ideas with you doesn't mean that you are not doing them, but rather reinforcing the wonderful things that you do in your classroom with your students, and which they appreciate a lot. With that, let me share my presentation with you. If you have any questions, can you see my presentation? Okay.
Yes, sir.
If you have any awesome. So if you have any questions, then you can hold off till the end of the session, till the end of and you can ask them. I'll just increase this a bit so that you'll be able to, yeah. Okay. So teaching diversity and social justice in the communication media, I forgot the culture bit of it, but I guess it's all embedded inside, in the communication culture, media and journalism classroom. And this, I think, in my mind, a very important topic, and we'll discover nuances of it, and we'll learn about it more as we go. So today, in the time that is before us, I'll try to cover basic terms about what is social justice, what is diversity, what do we mean by oppression, what do we mean by critical consciousness, why are they important for the communication culture, media and journalism classroom, how do we work for social justice, how do we incorporate them into our work as teachers, social justice pedagogy, and what are the dimensions of designing the social justice education class. And then we have questions. So when I'm talking about dimensions of designing the social justice education class, it's not about the faculty of education, but rather how we can incorporate that into all that we do. In many of my, I teach epidemiology and biostatistics, and that's a very favorite class of mine, in which we talk about ANOVAs and other regressions, multiple linear regressions and all that. But there also, there is an opportunity to introduce concepts of diversity and social justice, and we can do that. So it's interesting for all of us, I guess, whatever we teach in our lives. So what is social justice? So social justice is both a goal and a process. So we have a goal in our mind in social justice. Yes, social justice is a goal, but the work in progress of social justice also allows us to reach that goal. So it's basically ensuring full and equitable participation of people from all social identity groups in a society that is mutually shaped to meet their needs. So what do we mean by that? It means that in a social justice education classroom, we try to incorporate all sorts of principles of equity, both equity, respect, and recognition. So if you delve a deeper into social justice literature, like many of you would have done probably, it not only talks about equitability and bringing equality between different sections and classes and colors of people, but also it talks about giving them respect and recognition for the innate diversity they have inside them. And the process in which we try to attain social justice should also be a very democratic and participatory process, in which we are all respectful of the human diversity and group differences that we have. And the process must be very inclusive. If any big question comes up in your mind, just write it down and we'll come back to it, okay? So in interest of time, I will just keep on covering it if that's fine. In the continuation of what is social justice, by now you must have understood that social justice deals with injustices, domination of one group over the other, and trying to find equality. So a lot of times, there are quite a few groups, I will not take names here in the society, they talk about we will destroy one form of domination, and then we will be the person who will bring peace. We will be the person who will bring equality. Well, that is actually creating another form of domination, and that might not be the form of social justice. So social justice is not a power over kind of a thing, but it's rather a collaborative process, a power with, in which we form coalitions and we work collaboratively with many diverse groups to form a just society. And it requires confronting the ideological frameworks, historical legacy, and practices which have distributed our relations so unequally. A lot of things that we learn when we do our doctoral program or when we do our master's program in our universities is imbued with all these ideologies, these kind of frameworks, which are in many ways propagating social injustice. So this means we have to confront those ideological frameworks that we have learned and gained our degrees in, our knowledge in, and question it. So that is a big part of social justice. Then what is diversity? How do we define diversity? I mean, this is an easy question as well as a tough question in both together. But simply speaking, it refers to the differences among social groups in heritage, culture, cuisine, age, gender, sexuality, religion, nationality, cultural practices. And these are reflected in what we do, how we do it, how we ascribe meaning to it. And there are all sorts of diversity and traditions that we should affirm and respect. And by these definitions, you must have understood that these two concepts of diversity and social justice are tied together. For example, without valuing the differences in the classroom, without valuing the diversity of languages, thoughts, knowledge, we cannot meet the social justice goal of recognition and respect. So without addressing issues of injustice, we truly cannot value diversity. It kind of works both ways together. So social justice education, that's what we are involved in, right? So our goal the goal of social justice education is to enable our students to develop the critical analytical tools needed to understand what is oppression and how are we socialized into the oppressive systems. What is inequality? How are we socialized into the inequality? I mean, a good example is, let's say we take a small break and we reflect back from our childhood till now, how in our life, in our families, in our education, we have kind of socialized many oppressive tendencies, many oppressive practices. A social justice education aims to help the students to develop this awareness and this knowledge and the recognition of the processes that these are the processes by which I can examine and address. Our goal as teachers in social justice education is also to help the student not only develop that awareness, but to connect that analysis to action, to some kind of advocacy point on the field. What we sometimes term as service learning or experiential education, right? And our goal is to bring about this sense of urgency that yes, this is high time we started doing much more. It's not that we're not doing anything, but started doing much more to address these questions of injustice in our society. So, a lot of times in the past 5 minutes, this word has come up a lot, oppression. So what is oppression? So oppression is the term that we use to embody the interlocking forces that create and sustain injustice. And in one group oppresses the other, or a group is oppressed because of the systemic inequalities, structural inequalities. Paulo Freire, I'm sure you must have heard his name and read his work. Paulo Freire, wrote way back, the Brazilian educator, he wrote about oppression. And he wrote that oppression has consequences for everyone, both people in the marginalized and advantaged groups, both who oppress and those who are oppressed. Both are dehumanized by oppression. The goal of social justice education is to engage all people, all students, to recognize that yes, oppression exists and it exacts a terrible cost on us. And if you look at the schematic on the features of oppression, I'll go through it very fast, but then, the schematic, if you study it for a longer time, you can see that oppression is all pervasive. And you can apply to our Odia society or our Indian society to see where those points come. Oppression is pervasive. It is cumulative because it arcs over a period of time. It is sustaining, it's durable, and it mutates. Like the COVID virus, new strains come out, new strains of oppression come out over time. And it is based on group, it's based on categories, it's hierarchical, and it's hegemonic and normalizing. Hegemonic in the sense that, it's a part of our society. It allows us to enter into that oppressive structure without understanding what it is. It's internalized to us, it intersects, it restricts many people. So these are many features of oppression. And let's look at some of it, how to address it in many ways. Critical consciousness is an oft repeated term in communication studies, in health studies, in education studies. This term was popularized and developed in a big way by Paulo Freire, who was a social educator in Brazil in those days. And he said that the goal of educating students is to develop critical consciousness in them. And critical consciousness meant working in solidarity with others to question, analyze, and challenge the conditions in our lives. So critical consciousness means enabling someone to ask questions. A lot of times when we talk about health behavior, we have this health campaign and people will start wearing masks. We have this health campaign and people will stay 6 feet away from the market, each other in the market, but nothing is happening. I was talking with my home today morning, and it seems Unit 1 market was closed because a large number of people rushed to buy things. With all the money that government is spending, with all these behavior change programs, why is behavior change not happening? Why are not people changing behavior? So is critical consciousness is the answer? Should we try to develop critical consciousness in them? So this is the goal of social justice, to try to develop a critical consciousness and to develop awareness and mindfulness of the social and political factors, the structural factors that create oppression, and to analyze the patterns that sustain oppression and the interest that serves. By analyzing that, only students can take actions about what they feel, is the right way for them. Critical consciousness allows us to connect our personal experiences, our personal lives with the socio-political understanding, the context around us, to understand the external systems of oppression and the ways that is, perpetuated by internalizing it within us. Some critical questions for us as teachers and students here are: who makes the decisions, right? Who is left out? Who benefits from the decisions? Who suffers? Why do we call a given practice fair? Why do we call a given practice unfair? This is pertains to you at your levels of organization also, when you take a decision regarding a student or a colleague or some kind of organizational. So who makes the rules anyway? What is required to create that change? What alternative spaces can we imagine? And these are certain questions as reflection points for us as teachers and also for our students in our pedagogy towards social justice education in the classroom. Classrooms can be places of hope. I'm quoting this from this book. So classrooms can be places of hope where students and teachers get glimpses of the kind of society we could live in, and where students learn the academic and critical skills needed to make it a reality. This is very important because a lot of times I question myself, is that, I'm teaching these skills to the undergraduates or graduates who come and take the class. They're spending a lot of money. Now, what happens after that? Are they guaranteed a job? Does my education give them the happiness that they want to go get in life? What am I actually giving them? If I'm teaching them, how to do an ANOVA or how to do a health campaign or what is health promotion, or I'm teaching them some health communication theory, does that make them, really live well in life? So what is important for them? What kind of critical skills I'm teaching them, which will help them survive and develop and flourish in life? So that's why we call classrooms as places of hope, and why we have to, put in those critical thoughts out there. And this is very important for our students in the communication culture and media and journalism fields in our classrooms, because you see, most of our students, if not everyone, they're very special, and they go on to take jobs which are instrumental in creating the perceptual world people live in. Some become content creators, some become content managers, some end up in jobs where they write many documents, they translate and communicate science and medicine, they translate politics, social issues, they interpret and present voice as journalists in channels, and they create opportunities for people to share their voice. They end up as CSR managers, they end up in so many other places where they're the gatekeepers to content. And so it's very important for them to understand social justice and to have that critical consciousness, that reflection, so that they constantly question the injustices imbued in our structural systems of society, so that they can develop further. So that's how when initially I was talking with Vidhu Babu about this subject, I said, hey, this is very good for this group of students, for this group of for our field in communication, because it is exactly related to our line of work, what we do. How do we work for social justice? And this part I'm talking about working for social justice because teaching and working kind of go hand in hand. We are not only teachers, but we are activists in many ways. So given that systems of domination saturate both external world and our individual psyches, the way we think, the way we have been socialized, the way we have been educated to get a degree, how do we challenge and change them? So the question is, in a context where we are all implicated, right? We are all a part of the same system. We have all our hands in the injustice. We cannot say that I am the cleanest or I am clean. No, we are not, because we are all a part of it. So how do we find standpoints from which to work? How do we question our privileges? How do we question where we are? So a commitment to social justice requires a moral and ethical attitude towards equality and possibility, right? And a belief that people have the capacity to transform the world. I mean, these are simple sentences on the screen on which we're reading it and trying to make sense of it. But if we read it again and again and try to connect it to situations in which we live our day-to-day lives, you will see that these statements have a lot of meaning. For example, the belief in the capacity of people to transform the world. The majority of our communication campaigns do not take this into account. Communication campaigns, I'm sorry to say, even today, are based on the belief that we will give knowledge to people so that they can work. Now, if you are in the mood of giving knowledge to people, then you are fundamentally saying that they do not have the knowledge to make their lives better, which means we don't have a belief in their capacity to transform their own lives. So we are taking always an outsider approach towards their lives. And that might be causing a big problem. And that's why they don't really sustain any of the behaviors. So we have to have that commitment, and we have to have that kind of a critical look and belief towards the subjects we work with, towards the people we work with. Okay, so some points of working for social justice are: one, develop a critical consciousness. And that means working in solidarity with others to question, analyze, and challenge the oppressive conditions in their lives. And and to connect the personal with the socio-political. So one is to develop that. Two, deconstructing the binaries. Now, what are binaries? Binaries are everywhere around us. Things like male, female, black, white, straight, gay, young, old, disabled, not disabled, having the ability, not having the ability. And oppression works through setting up these dualistic frames that sets privileges some groups and excludes the others. So everywhere, rich and poor, everywhere, these binaries are created in our society, and we are socialized to it. So what work for a social justice is to recognize these binaries, these individual and social complexities, and then deconstruct them. Try to explode the categories which rank people into these pigeonholes. Third, draw on counter narratives. A lot of people have heard the phrase, if the history of hunting was written by the lions, it would look different, because the winner always writes the histories, right? The loser never writes the histories. So we have many tools with us in terms of critical race theory, in terms of post-colonial theory, in terms of critical historical methods, where we can draw on counter narratives. What is history? History is what Romila Thapar used to write in the history books when I was a kid in central school. But now that I've grown old, I saw, no, that is one version of the history. There are also other versions of the history. There are many versions of the history we do not know, because the people who lived that did not have the voice to say it. Even in our lives, we miss out on many narratives. We just privilege one or two narratives. So as a part of social justice, we have to draw on counter narratives, hidden stories of marginalized groups, including stories of the resistance to the status quo, and providing evidence as well as hope that oppressive circumstances can change through the efforts of human actors. Then we have to analyze power, the dynamics of power. Why, in whose interest do systems operate? Who benefits? Who pays? What are the hierarchical relationships? So we have to ask our students to question what has been previously taken for granted. And that is the way to imagine new possibilities and practices. Another interesting way of working for social justice is to look for converging interest. how interests converge in the socio-political world, how systems of operation modulate and sometimes appearing to respond to charges of injustice when it serves their interest, but ultimately continuing to maintain dominance. So how different political and social systems kind of converge together to maintain the status quo. So we have to critically look at that. And we have to make global connections like we are doing now. We have to collaborate with transnational activists and scholars to understand how how oppression, how structural inequality works across the border. What is transnational capital? What is transnational movement? And how it impacts labor, migration, gender, ethnic relations in different parts of the world. What are the different historical and geographic contexts that we should look at? These kind of thoughts, this kind of work, making global connections would give us different critical perspectives. Then we have to build coalitions and solidarity. Eradicating oppression ultimately requires struggle against all forms. So we have to partner with people. We have to build coalitions with diverse set of people, because the more diverse the group is, the more perspectives we can have in our work, in the media, communication, and journalism field. And working in collaboration with diverse groups is essential for building a collective strength, developing a collective strategy, and really trying to access the positions of people who are marginalized or who are in different positions of power. And last, we have to follow the leadership of the oppressed people. Giving space and assuming the role of follower provides validity and support to the ones oppressed. So which means that we have to listen. We have to listen a lot to the people whose voices are at the margins. And we have to listen to the people, make space for them to form a part of the decision-making process. So people from the subordinated group are central to defining, framing, and developing and leading responses to inequities and social problems. And the same power dynamics we are trying to change will be reproduced if you do not involve the marginalized people, the subordinated people. That's why they talk about participatory communication. They talk about participatory development. That is one of the reasons why the involvement of people is central to framing programs that kind of respond to the social inequalities and social problems. Let's discuss a bit about social justice education pedagogy. So SJE pedagogy basically aims to generate active engagement with social justice content through learning processes which are consistent with the goals. So the priority of social justice educators like us who are listening to this is to affirm, model, and sustain socially just learning environments for all participants. We have to think of our pedagogy as a praxis informed by interaction of theory, reflection, and action. So connected to this is the Freedian pedagogy. Freedian because Polo, who wrote a lot about this. So who said that instructors and facilitators identify and organize resources and initiate dialogue, so that through dialogue, the students, participants move to the center of their own learning and develop critical consciousness. So it's not just about banking education. So a lot of times you will see that how we have learned things or how we sometimes teach things is a pedagogy of banking education, in which our students have this empty vessel, a bank, where we'll put the money in. So we put the education in and think that that education will stay and then we'll cover the brain. But we have to have an anti-banking approach to learning. So students are not docile listeners, that I don't come to the class and I talk for 40 minutes and I tell them what they want to know and go. No, not like that. But rather, they are critical co-investigators in a dialogue with the teacher. So when I have my classroom, how can I enable the students to be critical co-investigators to the problem that is being discussed? How can I facilitate that process? So that's the Freedian pedagogy. Experiential pedagogy is also central to social justice education, in which you draw upon the class and connect it to outside, to learning experiences. Because students, it's easy to talk about, I will teach like this, I will go into a class and I will say that you are all co-constructors of knowledge with me. But that's not the way students see education. We have to respect that. We always expect when we go to the classroom that the teacher is the boss and he will or she will come and teach us, right? So the moment you tell them, hey, this is a new pedagogical way I'm trying to teach, there will be anxiety, there will be tension, there will be emotional issues, and there will be different cognitive aspects which will be broken. So we have to have a pedagogy that supports their learning process in a both personal and intellectual manner, which allows them, the learning process supports their challenges which they face, which acknowledges the emotional as well as the cognitive aspects of learning, right? So that is the way we can help them. We can push them towards that critical inquiry in their minds, which is a very, very, very central part of social justice education. Language is a problem in social justice education because in today's world, there is so much of diversity in experience, in thought, in features, and we need to be very sensitive and alert to changes in languages. How do we refer to specific communities? One example is, how do you refer to the people who have different abilities? Do you refer to them as disabled or specially able or differently able? These are the language issues out there, and outsider insider terminologies. It is very problematic to use any single set of terms to convey the complexity of a human being. So for example, I try to classify you or you try to classify me. Can a single term classify us? Can it really capture the totality of our identities, the totality of our experiences? Because we are complex as human beings. We derive our identity from multiple social identity groups and within the feminine population. So which language to really look at? Would you look at my name as Acharya and classify me using the caste-based denomination? Or would you look at my qualifications as a PhD and classify me there? Or you look at my experiences in communication and marketing, classify me there? Or you look at the income and classify me there? So, there's so many things. And it's the same true with our students. So it's a continuous struggle for us as social justice educators to find language that does not trivialize the power and harm the oppressive system that we want to expose. So some accepted terminologies are like advantaged, privileged, and dominant to describe groups with access to power, and disadvantaged, marginalized, subordinated for groups who are blocked from access to social power. So I'll quickly go through some slides and then open it up for some discussions, if any. There's some dimensions of designing the social justice education class. This is kind of a thing which puts it here, the students and curriculum, the 5 aspects of it. I'll go through it very quickly. So one dimension, as an instructor, who we are. We must know who we are. We must critically reflect what we are bringing into our classroom. So when one of us goes into the classroom, what are we bringing? We are bringing our social identities, our education, our cultural styles, our preferred teaching approaches, our personalities, our knowledge bases, our triggers, how we get angry, how we get sad, how we take a decision, how we give a grade, our biases, all that we bring to the classroom. So as instructors, we must be aware of this, like what it is, dimension 1. 2, we must be aware of who are the participants in the class. Who are they? We must get to know them. What are their multiple social identities? We must go beyond that name and that face in the class to know more about them. Knowing about our students helps us appropriate learning goals and anticipate plan and participant reaction. I know these are difficult to do in a 3-month course or a 4-month course or a 2-month course, but at least we can try for that. We might not succeed in the whole thing, but certainly. The third dimension is curriculum, and this is in our hands. What materials are we bringing into the class? What is the choice of the content, the perspectives? What voices are we including in our course? So because the goal is to increase personal awareness, expand knowledge, and encourage action, it all depends on what kind of curriculum, how you're designing it. That is a huge impact on the social justice education. Then how we teach, like I discussed with you, the anti-banking principle or the banking principle. How do we involve our students in the teaching process? A transformative growth only comes after confronting and critically analyzing previously held concepts, theories, and beliefs. Are we questioning these previously held concepts, theories, and beliefs in our classes? Or are we passively accepting anything that's written in the books? Are we involved in a critical questioning of many things that we learn to progress, So these are important things, how instructors model self-reflection, critical analysis, and openness to feelings and ideas is much a part of the growth experience as the theoretical content. And the last dimension is the climate and classroom dynamics. So how is the classroom? How do people sit in the classroom? What is the climate out there? These are all also kind of connected to the other dimensions we discussed. What is the form of communication in the classroom expected? How do people interact? Right now, you must be seeing a lot of things happening in which they want to break up the normal classroom into different structures by using technology or different seating arrangements. These are all a part of this. How we are going to impact the climate and classroom dynamics. 3 last slides, making things simple. So 3 things also you can incorporate. One is, like we discussed, reflect on your role as a teacher, be transparent. Very important. What is the reasoning behind your curricular choices? What is your lack or expertise or the presence of expertise that you have? How can we generate trust and respect? How can we demonstrate, cultural self-awareness, respect people, recognize people, establishing ground rules? That's one. Reflect on your role as a teacher, be transparent. 2, create an inclusive learning environment, which is inclusive to diversity, which is inclusive to all forms of diversity inside the classroom. And by creating that environment means that we have to work on our curriculum so that that is also inclusive of diversity. We have to design our assignments that meet diverse learning styles. We have to be listeners as teachers in the classroom and not always speakers. We have to allow and acknowledge for cultural differences in communication. We have to encourage disagreement with concepts. And we, of course, have to create and facilitate cross-cultural learning through groups. So, these are, and the third one, like we discussed, is to integrate experiential learning experiences in the classroom, like service learning or projects near the university. So if you're teaching something in communication, media, culture, journalism, how can we integrate exercises in which students go out to the community and use those skills, and the learning becomes experiential? How can we identify spaces and times where the students are able to analyze the personal and also their other avatar in the classroom? How can the students distinguish between social systems and individual experiences, especially when the conflict with that's not me, that's not true? Many things, like, for example, I come to the classroom with my own experiences. You talk about something else. Well, I have not felt it. I never learned about it. So as a teacher, how can you help me understand that? So these are the 3 methods of cheat sheet of how we can incorporate some ideas. But I think overall, you get the idea about how can incorporate many of these principles in our classroom. I'll stop here and open it up for discussion. Rather, going with my philosophy that we shouldn't be banking knowledge into a group, but rather allowing opportunities for cross-participation and dialogue. Yeah, I stop here.
Thank you so much, sir, for your talk. It was quite introspective and enlightening in itself. So I would ask the participants to drop in either their questions in the chat box, or you may raise your hand or unmute yourself and ask the question. I would encourage all of you to do that. So yes, Dr. Bidubhushan Das has raised his hand. Yes, Bidu sir.
It was a great presentation, and what I found, and I may be wrong, my observation may be wrong. Are you too much influenced by the philosophy of Polo?
Yes, of course. Yes, of course. Paulo
And,
Freire has been a huge inspiration to me since I discovered him in the UNICEF days. So I worked for 5 years, not 2 years in UNICEF. But when I was leading their communications team in Orissa, and that was the time we had gone to I had attended a seminar on behavior change communication. It was a regional seminar with global speakers, and there I first listened to him. First got introduced to him, Paulo Freire, through Arvind Singhal. So yeah, and since then I read up his work. What about you people? Have you read his work?
In fact, I used Polo theory, consentization theory in my PhD as a theoretical framework.
Amazing. Yeah. So you know all about it. I shouldn't be talking here.
Yeah, it's in fact even some noise is coming.
Yeah, you can. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. In fact I worked as with Actionate as a Reflect coordinator, and Reflect is the Actionate's flagship program, which is based on Gramsci's hegemony and Polo consentization concept. So I worked in Jagatsinghpur on that project maybe for 1.5 years. So from those days, I read about Polo. Then I used that as a theoretical foundation in my PhD work. It is always great to listen more about Freyr's work, and that is always fascinating for me. Coming to I just want to, it's out of curiosity, I just want to know your classroom, is how diverse is it? Or how to look at your classroom as a diverse classroom?
Very, very good question. Excellent question. So my classroom in Indiana. So Indiana is a state, contextually, it is a state in the heartland of the US. If you look at the US map, it's in the middle, right in the middle towards the top near the lakes. So typically, my classroom has the majority of, depending on the class I teach, it has around 60% whites, 60 to 65% white students, around 30% blacks, African American students, and around 5% Hispanics or other races. So here I'm broadly speaking, I'm kind of classifying again Hispanics as everybody who speaks Latino. It's not so. There's a lot of diversity there too. And rest are international students. So that's basically the diversity I have in terms of in that ethnicity. But if you look at social class, the majority of my class is low socioeconomic status, because our institution serves a huge low income socioeconomic status population. And if you look at jobs, almost 20 to 25% of my class is elder, and they are doing some kind of a job and come back for their degree. If that gives you some kind of yeah.
Thank you, sir.
That's my tip. Yeah, go ahead.
Next question, we have one from Ms. Ruby Nanda.
Yes.
You could unmute yourself.
Sir, I want to ask a very simple question. Like you said that we should connect to our students, and we should make their experiences come out, like their personal spaces. But how much is too much, and how can we connect to the students at a personal level, and also not make them feel as if, because these are young people, teenagers, so we are not in a way interfering in their personal space. So how to go about it?
Fantastic question, Ruby. Fantastic question. In fact, that is a critical struggle as a teacher in many of my classes too. And I'm sure all of us share it with students. Like my daughter also sees a student at some place and she doesn't want to be interfered with anything. They come to the class to learn and they go with it. So there are ways in which, and also, when we teach a class, we are just with them for 3 months. I mean, 3 months that's it. So the way to look at it is, how can we create conditions? How can we create, projects where where we can build some connection, where we can build some build a collaborative framework with students, maybe through carefully designed curricular projects. Connecting with students doesn't mean asking them who is their father, who is their mother, who is their grandfather, which village they come from or whatever. That's not the part of it. The part of it is connecting with them on a different level. So maybe designing interesting projects, where you build a learning environment, where you but the students comes and consults with you, you consult with the students, and you collaboratively develop that project. That I found in my experience as a teacher as a good way of developing a connection. It's not a it's not a 100% way to connect with everybody in the class. It will never happen, but at least you can connect with some. And I'm sure you must have done that also in your classes, Ruby. So yeah, I mean, designing a well thought out, good collaborative learning process over the semester brings a lot of opportunity to connect. And that's the connection I think we are looking at. Very quickly, one very quick example before rest of you can share also your moments like this. I was teaching a class on personal health this last semester, and I had quite a few African American students from the Chicago area, from lower economic status, who were a part of it. We had a project on developing a personal health plan, right? A semester-wide project. During that project, 2-3 students constantly interacted with me, asking questions. And then through the questions, I found that in the second meeting, they started sharing about the personal health issues that they have. So using that, we developed the plan. I stop here. So,
Thank you so much, sir.
I'll encourage the other participants to.
May I ask one more question?
Sure, Vidhi.
please go ahead.
You talked about the diversity in terms of race or income. If there will be diversity in terms of knowledge level of knowledge or something like that, how do you manage the classroom situation? Level of understanding as a diversity. How do you manage that classroom?
That's again a very good question. I didn't talk about the diversity regarding gender. You know, here in the US society, a lot of people are coming out as trans or LGBT. So invariably in my class, there is a also a plethora of gender. So there are people who identify as cisgender males, cisgender females, as trans. So as a teacher, I have to be very careful of how to address them also. But that said, your question is very, very good. And how do we address different levels of knowledge, understanding, right? Learning levels. I think that's a critical part of our work as a social justice teacher, or as a teacher as it is, who can, So one is, one of the strategies to use the existing experience in the classroom as a part of your teaching methods, to draw upon the experience that the students bring into the classroom. So think of the way that when you go to a classroom as a teacher, it is not only you who's going with the curricular knowledge, with the knowledge of the materials, right? But it's the students who are coming with their knowledge also, maybe not of the curricular material, but of other things, of experiences, of how it can be applied outside. So for example, if you're teaching, let's say, a communication class where you're teaching interviewing skills and practice, how to interview people, how to ask the right kind of questions, you're teaching that class. But then, you have in your classroom people who come from different situations, who probably are managing shops, who probably have been, working with their parents for quite some time, who probably come from a different family, and they have experiences which can be built into. So that's one way. Second way is every assignment and every assignment that you plan for the class, make clear the purpose of the assignment. That this is the assignment, the purpose of the assignment is this is what I expect you to learn from this. So once you, and leave a line there for the student to question and to add something to it, that if they don't understand. I think this way the student understands, whatever the learning level is, okay, this is why this assignment is important. And try to have a rubric, try to tell the students how you will evaluate, what is your expectation for everything. That way people with different learning levels adjust to that. I hope that finds echoes with your experience as Vizo.
Yeah, because nowadays we are facing a lot of diversities, especially in KIIT. Before KIIT, I was working in Pune University, which is a public university. And I don't that diversity in Pune University, if you'll compare to KIIT, because though Pune is a very good university, but most of them are, you can say, from middle class background. But here in KIIT, there is a huge gap, you can say
Diversity.
economic gap, or you can say knowledge gap or understanding gap. Because as per the mandate, we have to have few students from KIIT University. Okay, there is a rule in KIIT University and KIIT University. Few of the KIIT University students will be given technical courses, professional courses in KIIT University free of cost. Those who are interested and doing good in KIIT University, they can join here. And it's a great initiative, no doubt. That you can say visualized by our honorable founder. The thing is that, for instance, the current batch, we have 11 students. Out of 11 students, 6 are tribal students from KIIT University, and 5 are students from other localities, from other states. Even 2 are from, out of these 5, 2 are from Kenya. And I see that, so I always say that it's just so diverse that we journey, our journey starts from Kendusha to Kenya. So where the Kenyan students is the topper in the batch, and at the same time there are 2 students in Kendusha who are struggling to be connected, to be remain connected. They don't have laptop, they join the class through mobile phone, and they do assignments through mobile phone. And it's a great challenge. And sometimes because as our students are very less in number, so we do more tutoring kind of thing. I talk to them over phone individually. We try to keep social justice kind of framework you are providing to us. The thing is that if there will be less student teacher ratio, I think we can work more effectively and efficiently the social justice framework.
Absolutely, absolutely. Like these are all teaching methodologies, and you can adjust it to a large class or a smaller class. You're right. I mean, obviously, if I'm teaching a class of 100 students, 150 students, my approach to it will be quite different. But still, then I can incorporate some critical thinking into the class. I can have different ways of incorporating it. But if it's a smaller class, at more of one hand-to-hand kind of a opportunity. But the point about diversity, which you said, this is fantastic because it's not only offers you a huge opportunity, to look at to bring in the diverse experiences in the class. So one way I'm sure you are doing this, I'm not trying to, here I'm speaking to the choir, is that look at the capacity that the students have. Look at the capacity that the tribal student has or the students from Kendusha have, the asset-based approach. A lot of times we live our life looking at deficits. When we look at ourselves also, when I look at my CV, I first look at what are the deficits I have. I don't look at what are the good points of the assets I have. So with the assets-based approach, you can also create many opportunities.
Sir, if I could interrupt, how to
Please.
find the asset of students, like by taking an exam or by, but of course most of our students are old students, but how can we find the asset of what are they good at? Is there any shortcut way?
What have you done to find the assets? You tell me.
Basically, we give assignments and then we realize, I think that is the way, what the strength lies, and then we interact with the students and from the background that they come from and how they are writing and how they are presenting in class. So that is how we actually know. But is there a better way?
No, I mean, you have done it, Ruby, that's the great point, what you said. And that is basically the fundamental way of going towards the assets. So when you go to a classroom, what happens is you get to know each other, the students, right? You talk to them, then you ask them, hey, in your introduction, tell me, for example, I tell them to tell me what's your name and tell me 3 of your strengths, what you are really good at, and maybe something that will remember you by. Right? And then some come up with the thing that, oh, I work at this place. I've been working in a grocery store for the past 3 years. Or some says that, I like to ski. Or some, I'm in the baseball team. So each is an asset. So if you're a baseball team, okay, you're a player, that's an asset. You're working, even if it's a grocery, that's an asset. So, stuff like that. And then you look at their work, and like you said, it's not a single process, but rather we develop this kind of a strategy through multiple interactions and multiple in the classroom and otherwise. And obviously, the whole semester might pass, you might not know the assets of some student. That is also there. But this gives you a reasonable frame to work with. Yeah.
Do we have any more questions from the participants? It's 6:13 already. I guess our next session starts at 6:30, right, sir?
Can I ask one question?
Sorry, hello. Your voice is not audible quite clear.
Yes,
you can type your questions, Jyoti. You can type it and then
questions in the chat box, so we can take it from here.
Am I audible now?
Yes, you are audible now.
Yeah. So congratulations, Lalatendu, Babu, for highlighting teaching pedagogies, including social justice framework, even diversity. That is good. And my questions is this is extension of Dr. Bidu's and also Rubin's questions on social justice framework. If you can see in India, there are different types of institutions. One is public or state-run institutions. There is also private-run institutions. Yeah, if you can look at the different types of institutions, the stakeholders, particularly the students, are coming from the different backgrounds. We talk about private university, obviously there are certain sections of students who are there. Even if we talk about the public institutions, particularly students from rural background are there. So you are teaching. My question is, would you follow the same different teaching pedagogies to different types of institutions?
Jyotibabu, that's a great question. That is a fantastic question. And the answer to this in my mind is you will have to adapt the things. The goal of engaging the students, the goal of asking the students to think critically, the goal of improving the process of critical consciousness in the students stays the same, whether they come from a rich family or a poor family, or it's a Brahmin or it's a other caste or anything. Or it's a rural students, because everybody has their own ways of looking at, because all of us are socialized into the structures of power, into the structures of inequality, and into the structures of knowledge. So the whole point is you have to question it. We have to critically think about it. Given a problem, how do we critically analyze it? How do we solve it? So the goal remaining the same. You are very right in saying that we have to adapt. For rural students, we have to adapt that process. For a private institution or a very urban students, you have to adapt that process. The goal remaining the same, you tweak the pedagogy. But the pedagogy of sharing, listening, collaborating remains the same. Go ahead.
Yeah, would you also suggest to include some pedagogies related to sociology? Because particularly the journalists, they lack different understanding about the social structure, social dynamics, social justice. Would you think this could be a mandatory or compulsory subject for for the media students?
Jyotibabu, you're very right. What happens is we have developed these silos of communication, sociology, psychology, health sciences over the period in academic history. In everything, we draw a lot from interdisciplinary concepts. Like, for example, we read sociologists in communication. A lot of work of John Dewey is used in medical sciences. A lot,
yes.
The majority of the communication theories come from psychology. So
You're right.
So you're right. You're so right. Even if the institution does not have a mandate, we as teachers, we have freedom on our syllabus. What we teach and how we teach it, so we can incorporate these principles from interdisciplinary theories and concepts, like you said, in our classroom. Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
May I add just one point, reviewing at our own syllabus. So in our syllabus at undergraduate level, what we do, and I think many of the universities may have may be doing the same thing. So at undergraduate level of Bachelor of Communication and Journalism program, we add few courses which are from other subjects, disciplines, like there is a course called political communication. So we talk about constitution, we talk about power, we talk about politics, we talk about identity, we talk about communication. We design courses like that. For instance, we have a course like culture and society, which is predominantly concepts from anthropology and sociology, like caste, gender, tribe. All these things are the part of culture and society paper. So similarly, we have a paper called psychology of communication. So we always try to bring interdisciplinarity into our the course curriculum when we design.
That's
And
fantastic. Yeah. Yeah, I'll share a small comic incident with you. So 4 years back in Purdue, I was offering a class on global health communication. So suddenly I felt, and I was offering it from health and kinesiology department. Now suddenly, and I had students from engineering, I had students from communication, I had students from sociology, from anthropology, enrolling in the course. It's a graduate level course. Then suddenly I had a huge resistance from the faculty in the anthropology department who said, oh, you cannot teach global health because talking about health, global cultures is our responsibility. So, and we had an interesting discussion. So, which brings light to the point that many of these divisions and silos are created by us as faculty who are specialized in different disciplines. And we say that, oh, I will teach this. It's my area. But unfortunately, knowledge is not structured that way. The epistemology of knowledge is interdisciplinary, like you guys have very correctly put it. And so we need to question, all these things. Why can only anthropologists teach this? That's a critical questioning. That's the approach. Why do we have to imbue these structural issues inside knowledge? It's supposed to be free and it's supposed to be shared. So yeah, that's a fantastic point. Yeah, you're right.
Acharya sir, I would like to share one thing with you, with due permission from the organizers. Actually, I have been working on, you are an expert on the pedagogy of the oppressed, as I gathered from your presentation.
No way.
I have been studying something known as the theater of the oppressed, which has been envisioned by Augusto Boal, who is a student of Freire, actually. And we have been working on areas like forum theater and community theater and something called theater for development, a coinage which has been directly derived from communication for development, especially in the Koraput region of Odisha. And you'll be fascinated to know that in Koraput in 2010, there was a CBT project, community-based theater project in Koraput, and it was quite successful. It was funded by UNICEF, but due to some unknown reasons, UNICEF stopped its funding and the project is not running any longer. But I have included that part in my doctoral thesis. We are now, I'm basically a theater practitioner also. Therefore, I'm trying to do something called practice as research, and maybe once again restart the community theater practice in Koraput. Let's see. And you were saying about the objections from the anthropologists which you faced. I have faced objection from my own board of studies when I proposed a MOOC course on media anthropology. I'm trying to convince my people here that that is something which communication people can also indulge in.
Oh, absolutely.
So I guess that I guess we have a lot of way to go in terms of breaking this interdisciplinary boundaries.
You're so right.
But extremely motivated to hear your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Saurabh. Thank you. Fantastic. Thank you for sharing this. Augusto Boal has also been a huge inspiration for me since I started learning about entertainment education during those early days. When Arvind Singhal, I listened to him. Arvind basically introduced me to Freire and the idea of entertainment education. And then I had written a paper on entertainment education and presented it at NCA way back in 2008, I think. Yeah, and that's when I got introduced to Augusto Boal and his way of work and theater for the oppressed. And it's fantastic to know that you're working in those things. We must connect sometime and then talk about it more.
Sure, sir. Sure.
May I just ask the last question a little bit personal, for academic personal. So So who
On a
was your,
public forum?
yeah.
Okay. No, I'm just
So who was your PhD supervisor? Was Arvind Singhal or anybody from health communication? Or health
No,
science?
not Singhal. Not Singhal. Arvind Singhal is a good friend and is a senior mentor in many ways. Mohan Datta was my PhD supervisor.
Oh, great, great.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for giving me the space and time. I really appreciate it.
Engaging discussion that we had here. So it's 6:23 already. So we'll be starting our next session sometime. So I would request my colleague, Dr. Anurag Sarun, to extend a vote of thanks.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Yes. Thank you so much, sir. It was a wonderful session indeed. You explained the practical meaning of social justice as well as elaborated the concept of diversity. Teacher of any discipline can relate to this and find it useful and informative. Particularly in the field of journalism, the two concepts play an important role. You talked about how important it is for the teachers of mass communication to understand these concepts, and accordingly, we should develop our pedagogy to find a better and effective class. You beautifully explained all the dimensions related to develop more effective classroom teachings, and particularly developing critical consciousness among students. That is what our all goal should be. And being a teacher, how one should present himself or herself in the classroom, how to create a conducive environment and to integrate tools to make your classroom more. And at the end of the session, it was a wonderful, a beautiful discussion on the theme. Thank you very much, sir, for sparing time and for this wonderful session. On behalf of KIIT School of Mass Communication, I extend my heartfelt thanks to all the participants who attended and participated in the session. I am thankful to our honorable founder, Professor Achyuta Savantu, for his constant support for organizing such kind of FDP. And I am thankful to CEO Professor Himanshu Gupta for his encouragement support. Thank you so much. We will start the session, as Souptik was saying, within 5 minutes. Thank you so much.
I think this is the screen from the from your last visit.
Yes, it's quite nostalgic. Thank you for sharing this. Appreciate it. You guys have a nice evening, and yeah, do well.